Welcome to the Listen to Your Footsteps podcast. I'm your host, Kojo Bafun, and this podcast is an extension of my book, also called Listen to Your Footsteps, which is a collection of essays, reflections, and poetry on things like fatherhood, identity and belonging, growing up, creativity, and the lessons learned. The purpose of this podcast is to gain insight and learn from the journeys that others have taken. I explore the worlds of art, culture, design, business, creativity, and life from the perspective of Africans who are contributing to the redefinition of the continent and who we are. Welcome. My guest today is Bradley Williams, who has worn and continues to wear multiple hats, including, I had to go onto his LinkedIn profile to find all the stuff, including MD at Media Guide SA, now called Entertainment Monitoring Africa, managing partner at Motif Records, which was formed by Dumi Molekane, who has been on the podcast, senior label manager at Sony Music. He is currently founder and managing partner at Artivist Joburg and consultant and lead strategist at Eclipse XLR. But when I first met him, I met him as Bionic. But so the interesting thing, first of all, welcome.
Yo.
The interesting thing for me over the years is you seem to have found a balance between, when I met you, you were the DJ.
Yeah.
But you were also like the organizer. You also ran stuff.
Yeah.
So you seem to have had this kind of healthy balance between the role of people who generally sit behind the scenes and the role of a person who's kind of on stage playing the music. Where does that come from?
Interesting. So I always kind of, when I think about that fine balance, it comes from I guess my first kind of entree into DJing was no one would book me. Yeah, so I had to do my own gigs. And then it just kept on going, and then it became the next thing and so on and so forth. And it kind of then stuck. And now I think it led to exiting the sort of, being on stage to being more kind of backstage. And sometimes, being confused about what my role is and, being in this gray area, which is maybe not so healthy. But yeah, I think it was, the reason for it was just being able to, get my own gigs. I had to organize, and it started, interestingly, when I was, I started very young DJing. I was 12 when I did my first gig, and I kind of forced a situation. I wanted, because I saw there were all these DJs, the heroes in the township were the DJs. And there's a family friend who was a DJ, and he had an amazing setup, a bedroom setup at his house, at his mom's house. And he had vinyl on the entire side of one of the walls, and these big kind of disco speakers and Techniques turntables. And I'd walk into this place, this lab, and it was just so incredible being in the room and learning to kind of mix and beat mix and all of that. And then being at primary school and seeing the DJ at Sports Day, right? And the DJ at Sports Day was like this cool dude who was dressed wearing leather and had the headphones and played records really loud. And I was really attracted to like the beats. And, back then it was like, jack your body, jack your, that 80s house. Yeah. So I was like, whoa, what is this? This is amazing. On the sports field, with my kind of soccer boots on and stuff. Or at athletics day, to then, watching and being obsessed with the DJ and not kind of, even bothered with what, whatever race I would have to run or whatever match I would have to play in, but what this DJ was doing. And then the interest just grew, and, I started messing about with the tape deck at on my parents' hi-fi and their turntable, and I would be scratching and be recording Bob Mabena shows with my tape deck and recording with the VHS, recording these videos on from TV and making mixtapes. And I was a sub-teen, right? So, and then at like, what was it? 91, Madiba got out, and Madiba did a road show, and came to my school, which was Palm Ridge Secondary School, and came out with these massive security detail and convoy. But the thing it was our sports day, and that year I was the DJ.
Oh, wow.
I managed to convince our kind of PE teacher that I should DJ, and because they knew there was this obsession, and they were like, "Yeah, okay, Bradley will DJ." And because I knew some people, I got to organize the equipment, and I brought some turntables out, but I couldn't afford headphones, so I used I had this makeshift. I watched this DJ friend use these makeshift telephone headphones that have now become a thing where you kind of use the phone headset on the one side. And so I used that DJing, and Madibs came through and kind of where you're sitting, addressed the crowd, and it was just media everywhere, people taking pictures, and I was behind I was playing the records. But our PE teacher was so excited. He was the organizer for Sports Day. He was so excited to introduce Madiba to the school and the audience that he screamed on the microphone and burnt the thing out. Then hands Madib's this burnt out mic that doesn't work now, right? And Madib's is like, hello, and nothing comes out. So, I gave Madib's my telephone headset, and Madib's addressed the audience with this telephone headset. And CNN captured that whole thing.
Oh, wow.
And
that's dope.
It was so wild. So it was so exciting. My first gig, did the show, it was, Madib's, we had this big moment, and I walked home carrying my records, like a little bag of records. And when I walked onto our street, one of the neighbors was like, Bradley, we just saw you on the news. And someone's mom had seen me on the news and said, oh, Bradley was on the news. And they came and they're like, oh, Bradley, you on the news. And I was like, wow, amazing. So I was on CNN. And then, one thing led to the next. I forced my dad to do a gig and organize a party so I could have my next DJ gig. So I kept kind of chasing that hustle, But anyway, that's the story. That's kind of partly the reason, I guess, was part getting that first moment of acknowledgement and my taste of fame. Yeah.
Did that feel like your path at that point? Like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. The conversations you're having with your parents that parents have with us at various stages of our adolescent. What are you going to do with your life?
That was definitely how I felt. I think I didn't really think about it as like, this is my path. I was just so deep in it. And so it was pretty obvious it was the thing. But my parents fought the thing so hard. And my dad kind of embraced it. And, he would give me all these chores, these tasks, like washing the car for money so I could buy records, doing the garden for 20 Rand and going, 10 Rand and saving up to go and buy records in Hillbrow. And so that kind of, I think led to, everyone kind of supporting this idea that, okay, this guy is the DJ, you know what I mean? Except my mom really didn't buy into it, and she wanted an engineer or something, But mind you, there's still some technical aspect to DJing, and I followed that path to an extent. But really, looking back, it was definitely for me, and I feel like I've followed my destiny. You know what I mean?
What music were you playing? I mean, you talked about, for example, like the 80s house.
Yeah.
What's been the evolution of, let's call it your musical aesthetic, if you call it that?
Yeah.
Because when I met you, in my mind, you were a hip hop DJ.
Yeah.
And this was late 90s, early 2000s. I'd moved up to Joburg. I used to go to Metropolis in town.
Yeah.
Because it was after the Le Club days, right?
Yeah.
But in my mind, you were just a hip hop DJ.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was initially the exposure to hip hop. So the kind of exposure to hip hop was through choir practice. Right? So there was church choir practice, the youth division at choir practice would get together at our pastor's house, and our pastor's sons were incredible singers and had amazing voices, being as young as we all were. And before the choir master came around, who was the kind of eldest son, all the younger dudes would mess around with the pots and pans, rapping in the kitchen, making beats and rapping POC lyrics.
Okay.
So kiki me bro alai dinge muche los van ik so POC was doing all this kind of like conscious rap, and that stuff had reached because they would tour townships, right? So the exposure to, I think initially was like hip hop, and there was an attraction to it, and the energy was amazing. And every kind of talent show at school, I would always participate and do some kind of rap cover, something, never really understood what writing a rap was, but I'd always kind of cover my favorite rap song from, if it was Will Smith or what have you, or POC, or like, I don't know, Salt and Pepper, but the stuff that was kind of popular at the time was this kind of international house music, and it was acid jazz, and all the stuff the other DJs were playing was kind of house, the early days of house music and acid jazz. And so I was interested in all forms of music, especially got into hip hop as well from like, TV, 0 Hour Zone, where we'd watch like Public Enemy videos.
I was in varsity then, and we used to actually all trek. Like,
everyone had that 0 Hour Zone experience.
1 o'clock in the morning to sit in the TV room because of basically 0 Hour Zone.
Yeah.
So it was interesting for me because I'd been exposed to hip hop culture, the music, for years before that, like growing up in Lesotho. And when I went to varsity, I'd just come back from like spending a year in Germany.
Yeah.
So what was always interesting for me was a lot of the artists I was seeing, I knew of them already, but it was interesting watching kind of people discover it.
Yeah.
And their experience also, I mean, at that age, you're not aware enough, or let's say empathetic enough to understand that, okay, somebody else is on a journey at a different stage of a journey. How was it for you in terms of that energy and being exposed to it? I say at a later stage because I was fortunate enough, like guys used to send us UMTV rap videos.
Yeah.
From the US when I was in high school, like at 13, 14, 15 years old.
Yeah.
Like, because I went to a school with multiple nationalities in Lesotho.
Yeah.
So you'd find like your friend, their parent becomes an ambassador and they go off for like 2 years to the US. And when they come back with music.
Yeah.
Or what's the name? Slim from Cashless Society.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Salim, when he came back from the US, he came to my high school before going back to Botswana.
Yeah.
So we were exposed to like breakdancing, all of that stuff, which is, I find but it's a different experience for particularly South Africans because it was so closed off.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, because I didn't really have, I suppose, maybe a sense of when the stuff, how old, how dated things was. So when it got to us, right? But interesting, in primary school, in what was standard or grade sub A and B, I used to watch the older kids breakdance, in like 84, 86, right? Doing the worm,
Yeah.
doing the spinning and doing, the moonwalk and all those things. And, so we had exposure to hip hop in that sense. And there was kind of, people doing graffiti here and there. And it was political graffiti in the township. And so being exposed to hip hop in the media sense and like consuming like the videos, also getting the kind of tapes from, friends or going to people's house, people who had Bob TV would watch like this amazing international hip hop, and then making the connection with like, oh wow, this is actually this is the source, and aspiring to that stuff, I think was quite interesting, like wanting to dress, wanting to look, wanting to mirror that and becoming and mimicking the artists. So it was more being engrossed and being like obsessed than like being kind of, I don't know, really bothered with like where in the kind of, I don't know, time continuum we were in the culture, and wasn't at all aware of it, right? But I think it was a bit of a bubble because it was really, hip hop was something you had to pursue. And it was still seen as like, oh, you're just a weirdo. You're like, it was like a geeky thing, right? Because after breakdancing and after the popularity of breakdancing, it became MC Hammer and, I don't know, Vanilla Ice. And then it fizzled and became, I don't know, then we got into like Soul to Soul and acid jazz, and people grew into that, and like Michael Jackson, right? And, Brenda Fassie, and, it became like, I don't know what that was, 80s pop, bubblegum, yeah. And then, Kwaito. So, being hip hop then became this niche, and, my kind of DJ, the kind of path as a DJ, I would just play these records based on how I was positioned at the time. I was like an apprentice to this homie from the hood, DJ Hugo.
Okay.
And so Hugo I would carry his crates, and he would take me to the matinees he'd play at, and I would play records before him. I'd do the warm-up set.
Yeah.
And, Hugo had a whole crew around him, and those guys would come on after me. He had like 4 DJs open for him, right? No one would necessarily, we'd all get like the early sets or the cold sets,
yeah.
And I'd have these kind of more senior DJs who would kind of come out and critique my mixes. And it was really just about the technical aspect, but also here and there musically getting the right selection to get the party going. So people would go, nah, you're playing the wrong joint, or, your mix was off or whatever, so you'd have this continuous kind of development, as you were getting exposed and as I was getting exposed. And so that then, meant I would play a very diverse, eclectic selection.
Yeah.
And it led to being able to play at queues. Eventually, I'd go ice skating downtown and would find myself at queues with my records this one random afternoon and asked to get on. Asked the club. I was like, I'm here to DJ, and he was like, what? Okay, go on and play. And I think one of their DJs didn't show up this one day. And so I played the matinee set. It was dance music. So I played the house music set, and people loved it. And, I think I kind of, I had to have killed it because, I got called back. And when I got called back, I did it like a few times. I'd then walked upstairs and found this other room, which was like darker and dingier. And people were smoking weed in that room. And there was this tall, kind of Latino looking character. And that was Blaze playing these, Ice Cube and Public Enemy and POC records in to like what would have been a tenth of the crowd capacity of the room. And it was small, but it was hella interesting and energetic because people were rapping along and vibing, and the dancing was different. It was, it was like kind of boom bap, and it was like, I was like, what? And that's where I would hang out. And so I'd always come back to the spot for that and get asked to then play a warm-up set at Q's in the afternoon in the matinee between 12 and 3. And eventually the owner was like, oh man, you're actually really good. Please, I want to give you the residency to play on Saturday matinees. And I was like, yeah, of course. And it was like for a good 3 or 4 hours for 60 Rand back then. And it was like in the night, and I was like 13, 14 years old. So it made sense. But that was like when I got exposed to Blaze. This was the introduction to Blaze and Joburg's hip hop scene and the underworld of hip hop in the city. And it was at Q's in that tiny room. And in the room were people like Isaac Chokwe, Amo, and a number of heads. Some names I forget now. But anyway.
It's interesting because even those of us who weren't in the city, it's like that era seems to have there was a special energy to it. And it felt like a small, close-knit kind of community. I think there was an energy to it that could be likened to kind of our version of what happened in other cities around the world, where it's hip-hop, particularly from Joburg perspective, because like you're saying, POC coming from a Cape Town perspective, I've always found that there was more activism tied to hip-hop coming out of Cape Town,
Black
Western
noise.
Cape, as compared to, and then Joburg was a lot more like an East Coast sounding and East Coast feel to it. Whereas I found that particularly, let's say, heading kind of early, but more mid-90s with G-Funk and the growth of West Coast, that's when it really penetrated the country a lot more. And I personally attribute that to the music because, kind of, it feels a stereotype, and I hate those kind of stereotypes. But as Africans, we enjoy moving.
Yeah.
When music is on, and East Coast boom bap stuff, you really between Wu-Tang and whoever, for the average person, it's it was not danceable music.
Yeah.
But that era, and because I came to Joburg afterwards, it's always held that kind of, there's a certain mystique to it.
Yeah,
which is brilliant. I just caught on to Metropolis.
Yeah, which was really the club. It was just the biggest space in the same kind of building, but the club was the name of this bar that we would host our matinees at. But yes, sorry.
I had my car radio stolen outside Metropolis the one night.
Yeah. Sounds about right.
I think it was the night that Jean Grey, when she was still What, and Bobito were there.
Yeah.
And then I got back to my car and back window broken, radio gone.
Yeah.
From under the seat, because we still had those, the pull out face.
Pull out, yeah. They must have seen you put it under the seat.
Yeah.
But yeah.
You made that transition to not just kind of DJing, but also organizing artists.
Yeah.
Was that very conscious? Because it feels from the outside looking in, the trajectory was, you DJing, you linking up with Blaze and starting to do stuff. And then all of a sudden you organizing, What was here, Bobito was here, and then Black August afterwards. Was that conscious, or did it... how I'm trying to get the thinking behind, okay, I'm DJing, I'm doing all right.
What was the driver?
We're organizing, we're organizing our own gigs so that we always have gigs to DJ we're going to promote now.
Yeah. So, it started, going back to the time when I hustled my dad into helping me set up my first show, and it was at the Madiba sports day thing. I had organized, I told my dad that we're doing a disco at the school hall, and I had hired the community hall on date X because I'd walk past it every day. And I was like, that's the spot I want to throw my first disco at. And hired this, found out it was available. But my dad had to come to formalize it. So I had to talk him into it. And I'm not sure how I kind of, how that behavior, where that stems from, that kind of organizing. Maybe probably potentially from observing my parents, because my dad was in athletics and he was a long distance runner, and he used to kind of organize, he used to do these community runs and organize people in the community, and he'd always be kind of moving, a kind of combi load full of runners to a race. And maybe it could have been that, I don't know. Or, being a subject in being organized, being a passenger in the process of being organized for like church choir and that kind of thing. And my grandfather was a pastor, and maybe being exposed to that. And so the event was like barely it was a success in my eyes because it was done when I was like 12, and the party, all my friends came out. I had a flyer, put the flyer out and organized, and then realized that I had to do more of that to get gigs. And there were a few in between leading up to the residency at Q's when I was like 14. And then it was like, oh man, I'm made. I've got my, I could play 3 hours every Saturday in the city and buy some singles from Look and Listen in Hillbrow, and grow my collection. It is really about that. But so being able to, I think, put the gigs together, I think there was also just a part of no one else was doing it, So with Blaze, we got to a point where him and I he became like my mentor, and he organized that entire hip hop thing and was the kind of driver and the lead, community head, really. And so I spent a lot of time with him, and he, having been a DJ for a band, a rap group from Cape Town, I think, he had done a bit of work organizing and kind of being a pseudo kind of, roadie. As, DJs tend to be given those roles also. You're like the bottom of the, in terms of the hierarchy, the lead guy would do the least amount of work because he has to remember his raps, and then the DJ will be, he plays the beat. So, organize the rest of this mission. I think, Blaze was that guy. I think he and was exposed to other leadership, Lanster and band managers and stuff. So I think, it was in part like just being the subject that was a part of a group that was being organized and observing, and then applying those intuitive processes to what was required to get my next gig, to buy more records. So there were incentives, had led to then this sort of subconscious way of doing things, and mostly creating with the idea of like being able to evolve the scene. So a part of like hanging out with Blaze was always looking out for the next shit. What's the new records coming out? Being able to kind of have a sense of forecasting the dope shit. Yeah. So we were the best, right? And we would always have to collect the records before Amu showed up with something his dad brought back from Atlanta or whatever, you know what I mean? So to be the leaders of this, we'd have to be that organized and ahead of the curve. And so with that, I think came this kind of creative direction and strategy, cutting through the noise to see the next thing. And, we saw, the thing I caught a wave of was Raucous Records and Mos Def and all of that through, consuming of the media and being in a tight-knit circle with Tumi and Zweli.
Yeah.
And Zweli was my secret source, my secret plug. And he was like, yo, there's this dude called Mos Def. And, you know, Zweli was like almost the researcher for the movement, you know, so he'd go, oh, check, this is the next shit coming. And, you know, and then I'd escalate, you know. And so we would continuously kind of just get the insights, pull the insights and watch, you know, consume the media. It's pre-internet days, right? And then, you know, eventually the organizing kind of happened because it was also in part that there was all the support. There was, you know, Zweli as a source, Blaze as a source, and Blaze also being at BMG and having produced the Motherload and kind of been involved in kind of producing of the Motherload with Cube Music and being in those studio sessions led to wanting to kind of create and do more things and contribute. And I you know, and it wasn't like we were doing things for money. So, you know, like your son, I didn't really care about licensing and copyrights and, you know, putting my name on something, but I'd contribute and go, oh yeah, put that bass line here. Oh, what about those drums, etc., you know? And I think also because we were in this kind of crowdsourcing, open source, that was the culture really, you know, but, you know, when in this creative sphere where, you know, there were times when when POC would be home in Yeovil from a, you know, 6-month touring stint in the UK, in Europe, and they spent 3 months in Yeovil and we would just plug in and try and drain as much or extract as much information and insights from them and learning about where things were going and being in a room with Reddy D in like the early 90s and Reddy D showing us some moves to Shaheen unpacking a sampler and doing like a crash course on beat making. It was really just about, like, I suppose getting that access, and it all kind of came via Blaze, right? But so yeah, leading to how conscious things were. It was conscious in the sense that it was about how do we grow the collective and kind of falling into place in a kind of accidental way and carving out a role of sorts as a organizer because of Le Club. And, you know, I think what felt like a responsibility, right? But also for self-fulfillment, wanting to see and realize the next wave of the culture would continuously kind of search for these things. And so the Bobito thing came from Mischief, having been in Mischief, had a trip to New York via somehow his parents and met up with Doom, with Dumile. And Doom introduced Mischief to Bobito.
Which makes sense. Like Zim.
Yes.
Like,
yeah. So imagine that. And Mischief coming back going, oh, Bradley, there's this DJ you need to link up with, Bobito. And at the time I was on Voice of Soweto hosting the Saturday afternoon freestyle sessions. Voice of Soweto had an open phone line and we could call anywhere. So I'd pick up the phone and call Bobito. And, you know, we had a chat, and next thing Bobito's like, I'd love to come and play at your club. Like, could we make something happen? I was like, yeah, of course. And, you know, it was just this kind of like seamless thing. And we connected, I guess, because of the culture, but because of, you know, the Mischief link. But just thinking about it now was quite wild. So a lot of the stuff was also by chance. You know what I mean? It was just by chance and through this kind of collective energy. And Mischief was an artist I'd signed to my label, Eargasm Records, with
Eargasm. I've
with
forgotten about
Martin,
Eargasm.
with Mr. Bigger and Melanie. And so, you know, that's how we got linked up with Bobito. But so, yeah, then, one thing led to the next, and all these really interesting opportunities would come, and I would pursue the ones I had the most personal interest in. So I'd go, I definitely want to see Bobito spin, or and who else, and he was like, oh, I know Mr. Lin. And I was like, Mr. Lin of Cold Flow, of course, yes, and it wasn't like strategically curating a show to sell out, but rather to create something I would want to watch and be a part of, and and everything, all the kind of concert productions to the shows at the club, the DJs we booked, and the acts was about what it was what we thought was good for the scene, and what we really personally enjoyed or would want to witness ourselves. Yeah.
You are listening to the Listen to Your Footsteps podcast, a podcast in which I chat to Africans from a cross-section of society and sectors, including art, culture, design, business, and creativity, to name a few. I delve into their journeys, the decisions they've taken to get to where they are, how they do what they do, and everything in between. Essentially, we go wherever the conversation takes us. So I hustled my way in.
Yeah, I know.
To interview what and Bobito, because Melanie hooked it up. Yeah, and ironically, I was writing it for Cosmopolitan magazine of all magazines. I don't think it was ever published.
Oh wow!
But I was a Bobito fan because of his writing. So I started I started collecting hip hop and music magazines already probably late 80s, early 90s. So I used to get, CNA used to bring in like Rap Pages, Source, etc. for me.
Yeah, yeah.
And I had my siblings lost all of that stuff, but like I had all of them. And Bobito was one of the people whose writing I followed, and I enjoyed he had a column in there. So him, Dream Hampton.
Yeah.
And a couple
Vibe, yeah? Was this Vibe and Rap Pages?
Yeah, it was Source. Vibe, Rap Pages, Source, XXL.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to interview him because I'd followed his writing.
Yeah.
And he would not leave the DJ booth. So I interviewed him while he was playing at like 3:00 in the morning.
Yeah. Sounds about right.
And I had a dictaphone, and I don't remember what happened with that. And then the interesting connection with the what felt like the next thing you worked on. So with Black August, I also followed Dream Hampton's writing.
Yeah.
And I was a huge Dream Hampton fan.
Yeah, she came out. Yeah.
And I mean, I've gotten to know her a bit through Twitter, so like we communicate. But I went to Black August and I had a particular experience of it being in the crowd. And then years later, I got to see a little documentary snippet that she actually shot while she was here.
You're lying.
For Black August.
She has a docu.
She has footage.
Yeah.
From Black August at Park Station.
Yeah. Wow.
So it was just, I mean, it was interesting for me, like I said, because I've been kind of watching your journey and experiencing the fruits of your journey, sometimes from the outside, sometimes from a bit closer.
Yeah.
Which leads my next question. When did you decide, because at some stage the conversations behind your back were, he doesn't want to be called Bionic anymore, he's Bradley. It's like, and then everybody going, yeah, I need to remember that. Like, because I'm so used to going, hey, Bionic. Was that a decision?
It was somewhat. Yeah, it was really where I had now started carving out this new kind of professional path in consulting, brand consulting, strategy. And I did more of that than DJ sets.
Okay.
And, it was most of the kind of connections in the room, in the community, were of this Bradley person. And who knew that, oh, yeah, you know, I used to be a DJ, what have you. And so I didn't want to really be in these rooms purely on the back of having known youth culture and hip hop culture and being a leader in necessarily, because that's the, you know, that got me into the room, but got me so far, and it was kind of pigeonholed as like, oh yeah, that's the guy who we go to for like trends and you know, and we're gonna check our coolness with this guy, and you know, we'll you know, I was there to kind of screen or verify and co-sign, you know, as an insights person. So the idea was really evolving from that, and so I suppose that's where it came from, and it just became habit of now forcing this new rebrand onto the friends and community, right? But Bionic's still there, bro. You know, I still have all my records and my turntables, and you know, once in a while, I'll once, you know, I played a gig just before COVID. It was I think it was like the 20th of March, like the week before, 2 weeks before. And it was at the Puma store, Dassler's in Braamfontein with Akio and Matt Sutton. And they were putting together this kind of pop-up for a Puma Def Jam capsule. Okay. And so, you know, the person they knew from the Def Jam era was Bionic. And so I came out and I played, and I hadn't played in, you know, years. But so that's how it happened. And I think it was really, you know, eventually it became impractical to do both, to be the DJ and this guy in the boardroom at 9 a.m., super sharp, and being able to pitch for, you know, something really complex, and to make what would be kind of non-culture people relate or understand. So I was continuously kind of translating culture in these rooms. And so it meant that I needed to almost abandon that thing, you know, and that's how it happened. And, you know, I feel like I made the right decision, and I enjoyed seeing the daylight, being able to have breakfast at the right time and brunches, and being out on the Saturday afternoon, being in a mall, because that, as you know, the life of a DJ really wasn't appealing in that, because you just, you know, you become somewhat of a kind of like a hermit. So you would be out, I mean, a vampire out at night, you know, till like the early hours, till sunrise or whatever at times, and then sleep off the days and recover. You know, Mondays to Wednesdays would be recovery days. And so it would really just not be practical as a, you know, suppose quote unquote normal citizen, right? So yeah, really enjoying being a regular ass human.
But I mean, at the same time, it's like that whole being having your finger on the pulse and being the person to go to for trends and insights. And I think we realize this as we grow older. Like you can only be that person for so long unless you live a particular lifestyle. And majority of us don't want to live that particular lifestyle for, like, call it the duration of our lives.
Yeah.
And we were talking about...
only Bobito can do that.
Yeah. And the worst
and
person...
Maria McCloy.
And the worst person, Diddy.
And
because I was listening to somebody saying the problem when we look at all this stuff is like, the problem is he's tried to live and be relevant in a particular way for an extended period of time, whereas everybody else kind of at some stage you grow up and you try and you do other things, right?
Yeah.
Because you can't chase that particular thing. So even the people that you've talked about, it's like they feel like they're living the lifestyle, but their lives have also changed. Like, you know, because we know them, you're seeing a different dimension to it, right?
Yeah, we engage with it differently.
Yeah, and also, we were talking about poetry earlier on, and I'm like, I made a decision to stop doing poetry. but I made a decision because I had a child.
Wow.
Right. So
Yeah. That's incredible.
when it was just the wife and I could still she always had the steady job, and I would go and try stuff. Like I'd go be a poet for 2 years and try and get gigs and get commissions, and because I was like, okay, I'm gonna approach this professionally the way, I grew up in business. So I'm like, I'm gonna apply that thinking to this thing. Like if I want to do this thing, it needs to pay my bills, it needs to feed my family. I remember doing a show with a couple of other poets and losing it with them because I'm like, guys, I have a wife. She wants a home. You guys are still trying to get laid off poetry.
Yeah. Where's my cut?
Like
where are the ticket sales?
Like our priorities are different, right?
Yeah.
And at some stage I was like, okay, I actually need to go and do something that is stable from an income perspective. And I've never really worked stably from an income perspective, but a lot more stable than trying to be a poet.
Yeah.
At a time when, everybody's booking comedians.
Yeah.
You're too serious for us to book you for our corporate event. And then made the decision that I needed to turn my attention to the things that I'm going to do that will pay the bills. Not try and open doors and open spaces, but prioritize that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I stopped writing, and I don't write as regularly as I used to. So it's hard to write a poem now.
Yeah.
But it was very conscious.
Yeah.
Because we were talking earlier, and then, having a second child and having a family and all the things that come with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And going, okay, if I ever do poetry again, it'll just be for me because I want to try it again.
Not necessarily, it could be, when you're doing it for you, that it could also be for others. And it is for others always, right?
Yeah, I guess.
But, hearing your about your kind of process and your journey with poetry and this pivot, I found that, this DJ work was, and my experience and the skill set is transferable. There's some knowledge, there's a body of knowledge from knowing, the music, having an understanding of how humans interact with music and the power of music, and that concept, having done the 10,000 hours, being a master at this idea of music and how people engage with it, became transferable. I'm sure with the poetry, it's the thing that led to the pivot into writing for mainstream media and being an editor and doing.
My route is slightly different because the writing was always a parallel thing. And I say that, so my father always encouraged me to write.
Yeah.
So from a very young age, I kind of put my thoughts down on paper.
Yeah.
And through high school, I always wrote poetry. And I have an ex somewhere out in the world who still has, I think, a box of my poems that I wrote through high school.
Find that person.
That I wrote for her. I asked her for them once. We're in contact with her, and she was like, yo, it's not happening.
It's in the little secret.
But I have, but poetry was an outlet for me.
Yeah.
But then I grew up writing. I grew up doing research for my father. He had started a management consulting company. I was doing research from 14, 15 for him. So
nice.
I was working on reports and working on proposals. That's who trained me to do, for example, what I'm doing now, like corporate writing.
Right. Okay.
And then I did a BCom and I majored in economics, marketing, and business administration. And I moved back home and I worked in the family businesses.
Yeah.
And we had a shop selling hair products. We had a newspaper. So I've always kind of written, and it's just the kind of writing I do.
Yeah.
And so when I moved to Joburg, and I had an IT consulting company when I moved here. That's the first company I actually started.
No one knows this about you. You know that, right?
Because we had an IT company in Lesotho.
Yeah.
So when I moved to Joburg, it was the same suppliers.
Yeah.
And with a friend, I started this IT consulting company. So when I started doing poetry, I was still running the company. And then I left the company because I always wrote poetry.
Yeah.
My discovery was going to Jungle Connection to meet Neo and Masauko from Black Sunshine.
I think that's where I'd seen you perform for the first time as well.
So they were performing there, and they said, so Neo says, listen, I was trying to get work. So I had a contact at Cosmo who was like, she'd throw me a lifeline every now and then and go write something for us. Because I always wrote.
Yeah.
So it was like, okay, I can do this thing. I know this person. I'd contributed to a couple of, newspapers and magazines. So let me just try and make a little money here. And then that's when I'd left my IT company. I was living in Yeovil or Berea with Duval, the fashion designer. And so I said because I followed Black Sunshine around the city.
Yeah.
So I was like, I want to go interview you guys. I got this gig to write this article. So he says, no, come to a place in Doornfontein.
Yeah.
We're going to be performing there tonight. And then I pitch up there and it's Jungle Connection. I know Julius from Lesotho.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because his younger brother's good friends with my younger brother. And he's younger than I am. But I knew him, right? And then people are getting up on stage and doing poems. I'm like, I've got notebooks and notebooks of poems from the last 10 years? Wow. I didn't know you could actually get up, and that's how I got into performance and started writing.
Amazing,
more.
Man.
Whereas up till then, the writing had literally been for myself.
But you went on stage, yeah? Did you go up? You didn't go
up?
Not
then. I think I went once or twice more before I got up on stage.
Yeah.
And that side of it, I always struggled with that side of it.
Yeah.
I always struggled with the performance side of it. I prefer if I can write something, I can give it to you and you can read it, you can consume it in your own time. And also it's learning, like you're saying, working with music, right?
Yeah.
When you're DJing, you start to understand people, you understand how to keep them hooked, what kind of moves them. I had to learn mic control. I had to learn, rhythm, tempo, tone.
Mm.
I had to learn all of that stuff on the go. And I am more introvert than anything else. And so, like, few people know this. I always used to perform with a mic stand. The mic stand served as my protection.
Yeah.
In a weird, it served as a barrier.
I see that.
And then when I started performing,
I know a few poets who.
When I started performing, I used to perform as Monster.
Yeah.
Like, that was my stage name. Because I was trying to create, coming from hip hop, I was just like, persona, etc. But for poetry, I don't think it actually really works.
Yeah.
At the heart of poetry is yourself. I think Saul Williams said the difference between a rapper and I'm paraphrasing, difference between a rapper and a poetry is what you're doing with vulnerability. Because with a rapper, they're hiding their vulnerability. With a poet, you're putting your vulnerability
in the
front and forward.
Right.
And I read this somewhere years ago, and it always resonated.
That's incredible. Stogie T. Yeah.
Yeah. We've had that conversation as well.
Amazing, man.
Where are you now? You doing the consulting work. You went and started, so you haven't left the space fully. You started Artivist.
Yeah.
And you had Untitled.
Yeah.
Which is back again in it feels like back again in the, let's say, running parties or promoting, but in a grown-up way.
Yeah. It is. It was the reason we, for our sins, Ken Zero and I pursued this space was because we didn't find spaces that we were would really allow us to present our craft in its entirety, as whether we were showing up as, DJs or producers or curators of a show or an A&R or as a promoter, and we spoke, Ken Zero had, done his party people events and parties, and he had an interest in OST in Brahm with Osmic and near the Ritual store, and the space behind that, he had run this kind of venue, and so he had a bit of exposure, and Artivist and the Basement was kind of his third or fourth iteration at this thing. But mine was really just about wanting to really formalize my skill set in that space. So formalize, well, rather not quite formalize, but to apply the skill set in a way to connect with a community that I felt was dormant. So we all knew there was this audience that wasn't catered to like ourselves, that we weren't being catered to in our music taste and, in the design, in the food, etc. And our taste had evolved. And so with Joburg being very much about like bottle popping and whatever was, cool and kind of young, we felt alienated, and Artivist was our answer to that. So it was this kind of like where you would catch us in life now. Our interest, it's the canvas of our interest in art, in, food and our interest in wine and whiskey and cocktails, and a reflection or I suppose a mood board that took all of our travels and all, our kind of travel diaries into a mood board. And we experienced the space both, in parallel, different instances in various parts of the world. And we wanted to bring that to Joburg, and that's what the space is, and why I think we're attached, and why we didn't shut the place down in COVID, because we've been through it. We really should have just closed the doors in 2000. And have put life savings into it many times. So the idea so that space is now for me is I have such a great understanding of the kind of intersection of entertainment and hospitality, and the kind of community around emerging artists. So when where we were at Le Club. So it is a bit of a golden thread of, 2 decades or 3 decades from Le Club to Artivist and Untitled Basement, seeing the value of the stage for the development of talent, of new artists, and to kind of contribute to, as a facility, to the kind of, music coming out of the city or the country. And I'd seen the power of that with Le Club and, my work with Motif and Eargasm and Sony, and having worked with talent and understanding how critical it is to development. So really, that's something I feel like that's the legacy part, and something I really, truly enjoy. And, I call it my patronage, my art patronage, right? And we do the same. We do that for young artists on our walls, where we curate exhibitions of, digital art, photography, fine art, paintings, and we suck at that, but we try, and we've formed relationships, and we've built a bit of we've got a bit of I suppose a track record, and we're being recognized now by the formal kind of art space. So it's an interesting experience to where we've got to, and that's become now a space where I want to take that experience and try to figure out how to scale it. So, for like a year now, I've got various forms, various pieces of paper and decks of how this would exist in different forms, in different places, at different scales, and to kind of think of it as an investment opportunity. So I am kind of looking and shopping this thing around for investment. And, with the idea of like also seeing the need for a bigger facility, a more professional facility for artists and for the audience, for the fans, to really experience live music in South Africa in a way that it should be on a global level, and for artists to have access to those facilities and the touring circuit. So there's all of that. So always conscious of like, okay, where are the other kind of links that and connecting the dots of like, my experience and knowing where the kind of gaps and I suppose the opportunities lie. And so, I'd done an MBA in like 10 years ago, 2013, at Henley Business School in the UK, where I was the first of the music and creative industries cohort. And it came on the back of doing the kind of MBA bridge management advancement program at Wits Business School, and I kind of caught the bug, the education, adult postgraduate education bug, and it's that led to now I think seeing all of the experience in as an opportunity at a macro level for building out products and services and creating investment opportunities for the formal sector, right? So the space now is, so interestingly, and with the space kind of going on pause during COVID with Artivist, I did a bit of consulting for Black Coffee and assisted in his due diligence of the Gallo label, and assisted in developing the strategy for the business, his strategy within the business, and then seeing how all of the kind of knowledge and the skill set from the MBA and hospitality, etc., can now be how I could potentially form this kind of, how I could repeat business in that space. So the consulting thing continues. And, I work with a number of startups in the creative space, so agencies, brand agencies, where I'm less now, so I'm less of the guy on stage and in the pitch, but rather about assisting in terms of the operations behind the scenes, how the business delivers against these amazing ideas, right? How it sustains, how it grows, and really kind of at that, where small to sort of medium really micro enterprises, where business might be at between 4 and 6 million turnover annually, to how do we get you to 15 and 50, and looking for equity plays in those spaces. I've done that work for artists, where I've kind of taken an artist from a bedroom MC to a kind of national or an international brand. And so, transferring some of the kind of strategy skills from culture and music, and then connecting it with, the sort of more kind of formal, finance and business practices of, I suppose, the MBA.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at, man. And finding myself at a bit of a...
As we wind down, I do want to add, you're talking about kind of building and development. This is something we talk about. Maybe you and I talk about a lot. In fact, every time we talk, we always end up there. How do you then balance that with time for your family and the development of your children?
Yeah, extremely difficult at the stage of where my family is. So we're a young family. So we've been married for 8 years. And we have a 6-year-old and a 3.5-year-old. and I feel like we're just like such disorganized parents. My wife's extremely organized, but like trying to figure out how do we kind of carve out the time? How do we block time? How do we make that time wheel make sense for all of our needs, and so the family's needs and the individual needs, because the family needs, so it's all kind of like intertwined with actually what we're doing in building out these other things. So they come first, and this is the reason everything else exists, and why I find myself doing things with legacy in mind, and with now sustainability in mind, and being a bit more conscious than I was. It's no longer just what's my taste, So I feel like there's an economic pressure to be able to provide, and that's also kind of forced my, I suppose, the flexibility. So I've become a little more disciplined, forced the discipline to maximize the impact in the time I have. And, people who have not arrived who don't have families and kids wouldn't understand it, right? So there are a lot of adults without kids who don't understand how time is not this continuously fluid concept, right? So it's really been about being able to now be decisive and focused, and be able to execute with the right amount of information in the shortest, with the least amount of time, and finding that discipline to be able to do that every time with most things, and then being able to figure out how to choose what the drivers for those decisions, what's the kind of objective when you're investing in something, investing time, what's the outcomes, which has really helped in a way, because I had blown 20, 30 years on kind of flowing and being fluid. And when you asked about whether DJing was my kind of path at the time, I just walked the path, right? So at the time, I was just exploring. I'm an adventurer. I'm just walking this Cape to Cairo journey, and following stuff that interests me, that sounds amazing. And I had all of that, and now it's like, okay, well, now the journey is different. So it's their journey, it's our journey together, and finding the balance, I suppose, is being able to get their buy-in in what I do. And it's almost like every day I have these conversations and negotiations with 6-year-olds, and a 3-year-old, and a 40-year-old, and my wife and myself. And then where I'm having to explain these decisions on where I put my time. And I'm accountable to them as well, and they're like, why, Dad, why do you have to go to Artivist tonight? You were there last night. Where's Uncle Kenny? What are we doing with, I need to build these Legos. You need to help me sketch. I want bedtime. So those moments, I've insisted that I have those moments in my day, that I try and push for every day to have, to make bath time and bedtime and book time, right? Story time, and being able to have these connections, because I feel like that you can easily fall into a deficit, and making that up is incredibly difficult. And I'm conflicted, man, because the opposite, the same happens on the business side, when so being able to juggle this thing. But so where I am is I'm in an interesting space of figuring that out and shaping this concept of balance, and trying to, I wouldn't say I have balance, because no one's happy right now. The business is like, yo, my man's like, yo, we need you, and the families, so both sides are just pulling equally with equal intensity and urgency. And I think it's just maybe where we find ourselves in society, in life, where.
So somebody once said to me, it's not about balance, it's about alignment. And it's not I think the problem is we think about it as a permanent state, right? So like I'm trying to find balance. So once I found it, then things are balanced.
Yeah.
Whereas it's more, it's an alignment between things, and that constantly, ebbs and flows.
Yes.
Like an equalizer. Like sometimes you wanted bass heavy, but sometimes you wanted treble heavy.
Yeah.
So maybe this week, because you're listening to hip hop, you're going to have that bass really pumping hard. But next week you're listening to podcasts and you want to hear the voice. And the bass is actually not really that significant.
Yeah.
And so that's how I have tried to kind of look at it.
Yeah.
But I think what you said about use of time really kind of, it articulated something that I've always felt. But I'll tell people, I really work in the mornings. So it's basically between school runs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Because if I have to do writing or anything I have to do kind of sitting down where I need to focus, that's the time that I have.
Yeah.
To work.
Yeah.
Because once kind of 1-2 o'clock hits, it's, even if I'm not picking up the kids, there's going to be something family related that has the potential to disrupt me. And even if I have that time to work, I don't focus well in the afternoons. So if I'm going to work in the afternoon, I'm going to deal with admin, emails, things that don't require me to really zoom in and focus.
Yeah.
And then like evenings, I'm supposed to go out, and I sent the wife a message, say, listen, so I'm going out because there's a whole bunch of things that are in the diary that are supposed to happen, and it needs to be coordinated between 4 of us.
For you to be able to
if she has to go somewhere and to take my son somewhere, I can't leave my daughter alone at home. But if I'm going out, then what happens with my daughter?
Yeah.
So you're constantly kind of making these decisions. So it'll align maybe this week, but next week is tomorrow's a new day, right? So next week is like a new week.
I never understood that when I was dealing with people with kids, from Ricky Rick to Stogie T to business partners. I was like, no, man, you can't take 3 days to come back to me about. And now I'm that guy.
Yeah.
And the one decision requires so many kind of inputs and alignment of this kind of multiple moving parts that it appears simple, that you have to be at an event on Thursday. What now? You're going, wow, is how valuable, how worthwhile is that exercise? Because you literally have to move a mountain to make that thing. So it is. It's now very much about like how we would assess the making the most of our time.
Yeah,
and time is so valuable now, and also the window we're in. Where I'm going, man. I should have really started this. My wife and I are both like, we should have started in our 30s, because she was in the 30s, but because or 20s, then we'd free up all this time, and then maybe I think you'd started in your 30s, 20s with kids, and
30s.
Yeah. But still, you find yourself in the same thing.
Yo, man, you have to go through. I really believe we have to go through, for you to be able to do what you did, what you're doing today. You needed to go through I'm flowing with it. I'm on this path as a DJ.
Yeah.
you need to go through that to be able to go, okay, I'm here now. This is how I did things. That doesn't work for now anymore.
Yeah.
If you hadn't done that, then you'd sit and kind of go, okay, well, you're trying to carve a new path without knowing the other paths that you've traveled on. So I always believe that every experience
So true.
gives you the tools to be able to recognize what you need to change today. Like I needed to work 6 days a week, be traveling all the time, even when I'm home, be focused on my work, to realize that actually I need to spend time with my family.
Yeah.
If I hadn't gone through that, and therefore then flip my life and change my life to structure it so that I'm by and large always available for my family. If I hadn't gone through that, I don't think I'd be living the way I live today.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
that's so true. And I find it's fascinating when there are fathers who don't compromise, who are uncompromising about how much time they're prepared to give. On you get an hour a week. And I admire those people too, because I'm like, man, that person doesn't have any kind of conflicts, or it does. Maybe it is. Maybe it's torture being able to make that decision and being disciplined about it, but understands the compromise or the sacrifice that needs to be made for whatever success he's or her would be chasing. Yeah, it's amazing, man.
And there's no right way.
Yeah. Is it all worth it?
A friend of mine always says, no matter what we do, our children will probably end up in therapy.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't matter what path
you're
take.
20% of your child's influence, or 10% if you're lucky, right? So, the greater force of will be the reason for shape them.
Yeah.
So, which is society, which is Instagram. Yeah.
And then learning to I mean, you fortunately still have a little time, but learning to start to let go a little bit. I mean, I have a soon-to-be 17-year-old, and I think of my two nieces. They're both 19, 20.
Yeah.
And they're going to university in Europe.
Yeah.
And they are there. Like, my brother is in Lesotho. His daughter's in Belgium.
Wow.
And
how does he?
She's carving a life for herself. And I was looking at my son and kind of going, at some stage, and my daughter as well, like at some stage I'm just going to have to let go, right? Like all of a sudden this person that I see every day and everything I've done is structured around facilitating their lives.
Is for that.
And then like one day I won't see them for 6 months.
Yeah.
Or a year.
I hope you're ready for that, bro.
I don't know that I am, but
yeah, it's torture. I know some people who are going through it now, and well, it's, you chose sorry, did you say it was therapy? Yeah, at the right time. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll probably need it as the as the nest becomes emptier.
Yeah. But also you could just you can just pop up and show up whenever. Yeah, and follow them, right?
Yeah. My man, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was dope.
It was amazing, man.
The Listen to Your Footsteps podcast is produced by Zebra Culture. If you have ideas of what we can do better, people you'd like us to have a conversation with, or would just like to share a thought, you can email me on info@zebraculture.com. To To check out past episodes, go to kojabuffer.com/podcasts. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share with a friend. If you'd like to get a copy of the book, Listen to Your Footsteps, check out kojabuffer.com/book. There are details on the various spaces it's available at. I'd also appreciate it if you could leave a review or comment wherever you listen to your podcasts. Finally, there's the Zebra Culture by Koja Buffer newsletter, where on a weekly basis, I share a curated list of articles, playlists, videos, etc. that have caught my attention. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed listening to the conversation as much as I enjoyed having it.